everybody, welcome back to the garden. Today we're going to be talking about how to grow these gorgeous bachelor's buttons. Now, bachelor's buttons are one of the first flowers that I ever grew, and admittedly I was like, oh okay, this is good, these are easy, these are growing easy. But I had no clue that I could have huge, tall, amazing, long-stemmed bachelor's buttons for my cut flower arrangements. So, getting right on into this, bachelor's buttons are basically a cool season flower. And by cool season flower, I mean they do best when temperatures aren't hot. Now, here in my zone 6B7 garden, I'm in Kentucky. That's a problem because my springtime is really short, and before I know it, it is blazing hot in the summer. Not ideal conditions for bachelor's buttons. So, planting bachelor's buttons is going to greatly depend upon where you live. Here in my zone, in my garden, I need to plant bachelor's buttons in the fall. These bachelor's buttons that I direct sow in the fall into a well-prepared bed, a well-maintained bed, no weeds, anything like that. I'm going to direct sow those in the fall. Usually I direct sow about the end of September, about 4 to 6 weeks before the first frost date is a good time. I direct sow those seeds. They quickly germinate in the cooler temperatures of fall, at least here where I am. And we have some great bachelor's buttons seedlings. Now those seedlings will survive my winter time and grow into the spring. Now, surviving my winter, it's important to note this is obviously going to vary depending upon where you live, but I find that bachelor's buttons in my yard are very, very cold tolerant. In general, the usual lowest winter temperatures that I get is -2 Fahrenheit, and that's only just very briefly, usually a couple days, never longer than a week. However, my normal lows during the coldest part of the winter are in the teens and 20s, so it gets pretty cold here. We do get a little bit of snow, more so just cold and wet and gross, but these bachelor's buttons are able to withstand that. They're very strong, and even though they'll look a little bit rough at some point, like, oh, there is no way those bachelor's buttons are going to make it, somehow they almost always do. I do have some losses. Usually I have about an 85% to 90% success rate with overwintering bachelor's buttons here in my yard, and that's with absolutely no protection. So no row cover, no hoop house, no anything, just out there in the yard. If you're worried about them, obviously a row cover or a sheet or anything is an option for those nights where it gets especially cold, but I don't even do that. Obviously, if you're much further north and you have access to an unheated hoop house, you can plant the bachelor's buttons in an unheated hoop house. They do great in there as well. Or if you live somewhere with a milder summer, obviously you can direct sow the bachelor's buttons into your yard as soon as your soil can be worked. Even in my garden, I can direct sow them as soon as the soil can be worked in the spring. The only difference is plants from a fall sowing of bachelor's buttons get amazingly tall. They get up to 4 feet tall, whereas the plants from a spring planting might only be 1.5 feet tall. The quality of the flowers is such a huge difference. I know a lot of people sometimes pass on bachelor's buttons like, they're small, they're short, I don't really need these flowers. But when you start growing these huge tall flowers, these huge tall bachelor's buttons, they attract so many pollinators. We can use them in cut flower arrangements. It's really just a win-win situation, at least in my opinion. After planting, bachelor's buttons really require very minimal care. Here in my yard, I do amend all my beds with finished compost before planting. But beyond that, I don't even fertilize these. These seem to thrive in even the worst sections of my garden with very little care from me. If you live somewhere with a drier climate, you might need to water them occasionally. I personally don't even water them. I get a lot of rain here in the springtime, and it seems that the conditions are perfect for growing these flowers. I don't specifically stake my bachelor's button plants, but that is something you might need to consider depending upon where you live. Here in the springtime, when we get strong, severe thunderstorms, these plants do have the tendency to fall over sometimes if the winds are especially strong. So that's something to keep in mind just in case you want to make sure that they are staying upright throughout the windstorms. But they are generally pretty strong. Of course, you can, winter sew these bachelor's buttons using the winter sewing method. That is an option. Those also will do very well. If you don't want to direct sew, you want to start in seed trays indoors, you can do that. Also, germination should be pretty good, honestly. Don't bother with starting in seed trays indoors with bachelor's buttons, just because, the seeds are so big and they can easily be direct sewed in most cases. As far as I can tell, I've never had really any trouble with insects, or occasionally there might be a few aphids on the plants, but never a full-on infestation or anything to worry about that will damage the plants. Overall, I just think these are a just really great and beautiful addition to the garden, and they are easy. They are especially easy if you're a beginner grower, or if you're sowing your seed in the fall for the first time. Giving that a try, I think they are an excellent option, and I definitely will keep these in the garden. That's really about it for this video. Hopefully it was helpful. As always, you can leave any questions or comments that you have down below. I'm always trying to answer those. Usually I get to them in about a week, sometimes longer depending upon how busy I am with work and, the channel and everything. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. I'd absolutely love to have you. We are making new content all the time. Sometimes it's DIY projects, sometimes it's gardening, could be even soap making. You really never know quite what I'm going to upload. So if you like a little bit of a surprise, you might like this channel too. Always going to just keep on growing. Be sure to tell your friends, hit the little bell icon, all that good stuff. I hope that you guys are having such an amazing day. I will talk to you all later. Bye, guys.